What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the hate speech hater here, and we're back with episode 115 of the video game therapy series. Not that I want to be topical at all, but I was kind of thinking about the I don't even know what you call it, the paradigm or maybe the notion is probably the best word. The notion of something being hate speech. And maybe and I don't, maybe it's, you could call this ignorance, but I really think it's an issue at the core of what it's supposed to be anyway. I don't really know how you can objectively say anything is hate speech. I think it's certainly, it all be posed within the confines of what the Overton window says is okay. Because I was thinking like in terms of examples, right? I think like starting with the question of what is hate speech, is calling somebody a Nazi hate speech? Is calling a group of people Nazis hate speech? Or is proclaiming that you yourself are a Nazi? Which of those is hate speech? Which isn't? Is it all of them or none of them? I feel like it in every way, it's either all of them or none of them. And either way, it's either a useless moniker for what words are, or a overbearing one, in the sense that it's again functionally useless. So it's either like you can qualify everything as hate speech to somebody in some situation, or nothing. And also, it's like, as somebody that is, and maybe it's not so much in these videos, although I've been trying to move in that direction. But as someone that is a very satirical person, like in real life, I often say lots of things in jest, and bits can go on in jest. I feel like a lot of the bits I do are not are not serious. Especially like the whole Hitler. I bring up Hitler every episode. That's not like a legitimate thing. I'm not fascinating with Hitler. I don't give a shit. I mostly say it because it in a satire way, in an ironic way. It's kind of funny to me. And it's not to say you have to have the same sense of humor as me, but at the very least, that's just my sense of humor. And some people will find it funny, and that's just the way it is. But it's like ironically calling somebody a Nazi is like, would that be hate speech, or a group of people? I mean, again, it kind of qualifies. Or if it's even like, suppose I were to be so stupid as to call like a race of people a Nazi, and I'm surely like that checks all the boxes for what hate speech is supposed to be. But if done in a satirical way, it's like, well, even if it's satirical, I don't think it's funny. It's like, well, maybe you don't think it's funny, but somebody with a different sense of humor might think it is funny. So it's like, it's just impossible, especially like in a medium like text or even video. It's really hard to tell what is satire and what's just like a bomb joke, right? I feel like that's just the other thing about satire, is that not everyone really gets it, and not everyone is really good at portraying it. And maybe I'm not that good at being satire, at least in these videos, at least. But that doesn't mean that it's like there's not like a serious attempt at being satirical in that sense. So it wasn't like. But then it's like, well, what do you mean behind? It's like, well, then it's all about like the subtext. Like, what's the message behind what you're saying? Like, that is what we're trying to quantify as hate speech. It's impossible to tell. It's like interpreting a poem. Even though it's like just a regular tweet, it doesn't make any sense. And also the scale at which you could generate these, like, again, things that might require, I'll say, tons and tons of nuance. You have to like register and analyze it at scales that are unfathomable to a human. So I just think the whole like process or whole notion of something being hate speech or hate speech at all is a silly concept. I don't see even like how you're going to determine that, because determining it is impossible, especially when you include people being satire, or again, people just not delivering things in an effective way. Even if it's like just bad satire, it's still satire. It's like bad comedy is still comedy. It just might not be funny. It's like Amy Schumer's not funny, but it's still like an attempt at comedy. It's not. I'm not going to call it hate speech, even though I hate it. But it doesn't mean that it is banned, right? There's absolutely no reason that you can say that it's banned. It's just bad comedy. That's all it is. Same with like people being satirical and saying things, or just saying things for dramatic effect, even if it isn't funny. Little kids just saying the N-words or whatever. And that's why I've said before, and this bears repeating, the whole the burden of free speech, people assume to be on the speaker, right? They assume that it is the speaker's duty to uphold, the rights of free speech, and the, what you're saying is to be, is important, or whatever, defend your rights. I think free speech is mostly on, the absolutist part of it is on the listeners. If somebody is stupid enough, if there are children that are on the internet and listening to somebody obviously being satire in favor of some, ridiculous, again, we'll use the Hitler example, um, you know, that is on the listeners, not the speakers. The speaker, sure, you could say it's in bad taste, or you don't think it's funny, or children shouldn't be watching this. I probably agree with you on all of those fronts, but the very fact of like banning them from saying anything ever, or banning them from saying even what they're saying, even if it is bad comedy, the thing is, the listeners, again, should be filtering out bad comedy, right? If you're really bad at being satire and people are tired of hearing, these fake Hitler endorsements or whatever, then they should not be listened to, and there shouldn't be any real platform. So the issue isn't that there is some, again, some satirical Nazi running around making jokes about Hitler. It's that we have swaths of retarded people online that are listening to them as if it's like they're spewing gospel, and it's just like they're just not. The listeners are the problem in this situation, and no amount of like governance can combat the level of stupidity that uh, is inherent to that system. So anyway, I don't really. I mean, I suppose you could qualify half of what I say as hate speech, in some, if you're, being stringent enough. But that's the reason I just don't think it's. I think it's either useless and like nothing is considered hate speech because you can always kind of have this veneer of like being satirical even if you weren't, or because even like there's like this meta irony now, and that's like half the way that Zoomers even communicate at all is through this like meta ironic thing, right? It's like, whatever they say, it's like they don't know if they're being serious or not, right? It kind of depends on the reaction, right? So if it's like, not to use, being homosexual as an example or something like that, but they might say something gay, um, sorry, something homosexual, and then it's like, were they being serious or not? It's like you don't really know at all, really, because it's just kind of the way that they said that, and I don't think they know either. It's not like they have some kind of intent behind it. It's not like it's an artist who's very thoughtful about what he's saying. Mostly just people kind of saying things and just checking the vibes after they say it, which is not to say it's like, that's just kind of the way people communicate now, and that's unfortunate that the internet has come to that. But I think with that requires maybe even more nuance than what you'd need with just analyzing an artist, actually. Uh, and that being said, hate speech either becomes useless or everything is hate speech. And then, we're just, nobody's allowed to say anything except for the government, which is probably not the best, the least of all the evils, we'll say. But I don't know, whoever, I don't know, it might not be the government, it might be private companies or something. I don't really care. Anyway, I'll move on to something else here. But anyway, I just think hate speech is a silly concept in every way possible. Um, let's see here. Something that there's just kind of, it's another mild annoyance of mine that I have a few more probably. People leaving half drank beverages, coffees in cars and stuff like that, or in their room. It's like the room is full of these like half drank beverages where they get the large ice tea or iced coffee, and then they drink like 3 sips of it, and then it just kind of sits there for a week. And it's not even in my immediate living quarters. It's in like cars and things that I'll walk by in the parking lot. There's a really nice Tesla that has the same cup of coffee in it that I parked by for 3 days now. And it's like, I think the buffer time for the acceptable amount of time you can have a half drunk beverage sitting out that you're obviously not going to finish, it should be 24 at max 48 hours. Ideally like 4 hours, right? But like the idea that you should have a half drunk coffee in your car for weeks and weeks on end is despicable. And even worse for your actual immediate living quarters. It's like, it's one thing if you don't use your car that much, or you work remote or something like that. But if you were living in your room and there is a coffee you got a month ago that the bottom is now soaking and wetting out, you're disgusting, and you need to rethink everything, because it kind of goes against the whole, like, especially in a Tesla is where I'm seeing this. You're going to go through all the effort of getting a Tesla, and this one's like even like a wrapped Tesla. So like they went to the extra effort of paying $5 more to get these stupid looking paint job on it. You're going to go through all that effort to appear wealthy and rich, but there's nothing more peasant like to have a half drunk coffee in your cup holder. It's disgusting. It's gross. Um, and I was even so observant to look at the orientation of the coffee to make sure I wasn't saying, well, maybe this was they're getting a coffee every day, and they just that's kind of their routine is to leave it in the half drunk state within the cup holder. No, this is the same. It's in facing the same, unless they're like so exact with the amount that they drink and the orientation of the cup. This is the same cup that's been there for several days, and I'm not just pointing at this one person that I don't know in the one car that was in the parking lot. I feel like this is a trope I've seen elsewhere where it's kind of normal to leave like even like with bottles of water or bottles of anything, just kind of leaving a half one out, or even just like an empty one just on the ground or something. And it's just a simple act of orderliness and cleanliness that just bothers me. So that's just kind of my one minor annoyance. Um, yeah. So I don't know. That's something else. Uh, Something else I wanted to do that's just totally unrelated is to give a yearly State of the Union, so to speak, about the state of Linux in the world. Because I'm not going to call myself a Linux YouTuber because I'm not really. I've made like 4 Linux videos all time, and even that they aren't hardly even like pure Linux videos. They're just kind of Linux shitposts. But I do think it's worthy as someone that is an avid Linux user and is in support of free software philosophy, however you may interpret that, to at least kind of do a little vibe check on see where things are. Where do I think things will go? What do I think the year looks like? I I do think it is kind of this like niche, not a revolutionary subset of people, but it certainly is a growing and ferocious subset of the population. So I think it's something like the amount of Linux users have doubled in the last year, 2 years, or something like that, which is a really great sign. It's really it's nice, but I do think the biggest barrier we have is just um, people that are like gleefully ignorant of things. They just love to not know anything. And I don't mean that in the sense that there aren't things that I love not to know, but it's certain amount like they reject the very notion of a self-reliant existence, right? Like the idea of them owning anything or just being in control is terrifying to them. They don't like the idea of having control or even I'll go so far as to say something being their fault, right? Because you can with the Linux system, you're able to break it, right? Like with a Windows or a Mac computer, you can't ruin it really. It's not even your computer. You don't really own it. You don't have like you have admin privileges, but if you try to do switch user like as root in Mac OS, it literally says sorry, meaning like you can't. It just won't let you. And I'm sure there's some way you could do it. I actually don't think that there is. The bootloader's locked, but I think a lot of people that will, and this describes maybe I don't know 80% of these Windows users is they don't like the fact that they could be in control. They don't like having the reins to things. They like things being done for them. It's just it's not really a mindset that is this self-reliant mindset is totally foreign to them. And I don't really people aren't like this aren't bad. They're not bad people. It's just they don't think like they don't have that thought process in them. But I think there are increasingly more people that are frustrated to ends where they're like, you know what, maybe I need to take control, right? I think because their frustration eventually boils over to a point where they're like, I'm done. I'm sick of this. I don't care what I have. I'll take control and I'll do this. But until that frustration really bleeds over, it won't totally switch sides. That all this to say, I do think it'll be another good, like kind of a solid bull run year for Linux users. I think it'll go up again. I don't know what the percentage is at. Maybe I should have looked at this before, but I'm gonna just go off the top of my head and think it's at like 4 or 5% or 3% or something like that. I think if it hasn't eclipsed the 5% desktop share already, it will. My only concern, I think, for the future of just things being Linux is then like corporations now, like actively promoting a lot of the switch to Linux, but then like making sure to kind of stick their hand in between. So what this looks like will be like the equivalent of like a WhatsApp versus Signal. Like Signal as a messenger is totally free and open source, has its own super strong encryption protocol. It has like cutting edge, all that stuff. And WhatsApp is essentially a wrapper for signal with Zuckerberg's encryption. So it just, if I'm pretty sure it just routes it through Zuckerberg's server. So it's like you're pretty much using Signal, except you're just telling Zuckerberg everything you're saying. So it's kind of worthless. Which people say like, well, what's up for privacy? It's like a good privacy messenger. It's not. But I hope that that same message or that same like concept doesn't apply to, I'll say like Linux distributions, because there even are like corporate distributions like Red Hat and stuff like that that are they might as well be Windows, but they're just Linux, I guess. I mean, they are, but it does have kind of the corporation's greedy, oily fingers all over it. And I do actually predict that to be the case for increasingly like a larger number of, I'll just say like Windows refugees that move over towards people from Mac or Windows that move towards Linux might fall into the trap of actually using some of these like corporate backed Linux distributions. And the other thing to look for is obviously just like malicious actors in the code base. But I think at this point, there is plenty of momentum and I'll say like philosophical momentum and not even like manpower behind the openness of Linux systems. There is like a strong enough base of like these, I'll say like absolutists or purists, in the sense that they won't allow, bullshittery to happen. And maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I do think in that sense it is, uh, you know, that's one thing to look forward to. My screen froze again. I'm gonna pause the recording and restart so I can get the gameplay. All right, maybe this will work. And maybe it will. I don't know. My OBS has been freezing. In addition to not accepting my key bindings, it has been freezing. But I don't know. I'll just let the show go on anyway. It's not like I think this is not riveting content what I'm doing on screen. And it's not riveting content what I'm saying either. But I mean, I'd imagine you're not watching this because you like to watch a man play slabs in the Nether for no reason. Actually, I'm not even sure what this is going to accomplish. But anyway, yeah, I guess I'll wrap up my conversation on the Linux desktop. I think it'll be another good year for people to leave Windows and Mac. I think the trajectory is moving in the right direction, at least the right in terms of my philosophy. I guess my I'll say technological religion is winning in that sense. If we're thinking about it as a battle of ideologies, which is often the way the world is boiled down to. Like, people believe that it's like these ideologies that battle each other and win. It's like, and it's always like the good ones that win. It's a strange fallacy of history that to think that only like the good kinds of thinking actually win. As if the ones that have been phased out over time are. And I've said before, it's like I think it's more so like the extremist ones that win. Really, it's the ones that are willing to die and fight for their like. I think the more modest religions or ideologies of any kind that aren't willing to be, to die for it, aren't the ones that win. It's the ones that, life or death is a part of their, I'll say, even like religious backing. And it's not even religion. I just mean of any kind of ideology. It's the ones that involve like the high stakes. Otherwise, you get people that like, if it's like I said, if it's like a Stoic philosophy, people are mostly apathetic towards violence or don't see it as the answer. They're not going to be the ones battling the Christians to win. They're going to get wiped out, right? They're just going to be like, well, if you're going to burn my village down, then do it, and I'll just take it in stride. It'll be what it is. And the Christians like, well, it's whatever. I'm not going to go into that. I don't really care that much about that. But anyway, I guess speaking of religions and things, it's interesting to frame. And I'm not responsible for doing this either, but it's interesting to frame the I'll say like the state or the government or the nation or whatever government that is running your geographical area, to view them as simply whatever has the monopoly on violence or like order. Violence might be the wrong way to put it, but order, like law and order, might be the one way to phrase it. It's like a government is simply an entity that has a monopoly on violence or a monopoly on order. And that has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about. I think what was interesting to think about, well, what now? Religion, I would argue, used to have the monopoly on morals, on ethics. Whereas if there's ever a moral quandary, you wouldn't go to the state. You wouldn't go to a bar. I mean, you wouldn't go to a rest. You would go to the church, whatever that might be, and whatever your area is. So for the longest time, than the monopoly of ethics or morals. I'll say I'll kind of use those interchangeably. It's probably closer to ethics than morals, but people draw a lot of their I guess their ethical philosophies from a moral philosophy to begin with. And the way I define each of those is like ethics is more of like interpersonal, where morality is more like within oneself. So I'll just kind of treat those as one of the same for this in this argument, although it's kind of more of an ethical argument than it is a moral one. But I think nothing ever has a moral monopoly anymore. I think, and my joke for this is that I think just as many people, probably more children nowadays look up to Johnny Sins, a literal porn star, than they do the Pope, right? Which is not, it's kind of a joke, but it's not really. I mean, I don't, I think it's truly the case that you might have more 12-year-old kids that aspire to be, or to, even as a joke, even, they probably have more jokes ready for Catholic school priests or boys or whatever than they do for like people being porn stars. It's not even, and I wish that was funny, but I mean, it is kind of funny, but uh, I wish that was a joke, but it's not. Anyway, I just think nothing has the moral monopoly anymore. And so uh, I guess when that happens, people are left kind of to their own devices. And it's freeing in one sense that people get to, there's a lot of different battling, I'll say like moral philosophies now, but it's difficult because it causes a lot of social turmoil if people don't agree on any kind of moral spine, right? Whereas I think like uh, government wise, people are easy. It's easier to find ground and things like with regard to like law and order and violence, because there still is whether you want to call them structured or not, there's still a group of people that run your government. Again, whether or not they're doing the job you want them to do is one thing, but there's still a group of people that exist in power in that sense. And like, if you will get arrested if you do something, more likely than not, it's not complete anarchy in terms of law and order. But in terms of morality, I would argue that it is complete anarchy. There is not like in the same way that you would get shunned, or you wouldn't be welcome at the church, or whatever it was that people did, back when the church had the moral authority. Now there's just no repercussion. There's no, in fact, it's like the weirder you are, you're almost celebrated. There's just like this, I guess sort of like outright pedophilia, which isn't even that. I mean, people still kind of defend a lot of that, which is insane. It just goes to prove my point that there truly is not any kind of moral monopoly, where there's a group or an ideology, even not even a group, an ideology that has some kind of like, again, moral spine, to put it that way. Um, so I don't know. That wasn't not like I'm going towards any thesis here, or going towards any resolution here. I don't think. I think things will just have to battle themselves out. And I think eventually it'll converge again. I think this is just one of those dispersion periods, with regard to ethics, meaning that there's going to be a lot of different ethical codes and things to live by for a while, and then I think maybe people will settle into a new kind of religion or something, some kind of quasi religious thing. And it won't be. Maybe it'll have little tastes of things that we're familiar with, Christianity or Buddhism or Zen or Stoicism or whatever. But it certainly won't be anything that we've seen before. But I do think something eventually will have to win out ideologically, such that there isn't, I guess, or the end of the society. So we go back to the hunter-gatherer days. That's the other alternative. But it is just interesting to me, at least, to frame things in terms of what they have their monopoly on. Whereas I think the governments now, or not the governments, the companies still probably have a literal monopoly on a lot of the markets. So I think those are another way to look at it. Anyway, included with this ethical turmoil, I think one thing I've kind of come to terms with, and I don't know how defensible position this is, but this is just kind of what I think. I think the lives, I'll say like the material lives, or the really just the lives period that our ancestors of any age are like gone. I think a lot of kids or children that grow up kind of assume that things will largely be the same as their parents. And for long stretches of time, that was true, meaning that like if your parents were a farmer and they did this and that, and they you're probably going to be a farmer. You can do this and that, and they're going to, they got married and had three. And you're going to do this and that. It's like it's a very predictable life, you know. Whereas I think now, I think a lot of kids or even adults, really young adults, are making the mistake to think that like, well, it'll just be the same. It'll, we'll have, we'll have vacuums and we'll have a carpet in a house, and then, but we'll have like just, a robot vacuum that'll vacuum for us, or, it's like, well, it'll be the same. There'll be, I'll go to the grocery store and I'll come back and there'll be, Jarvis that will be there to cook us meals, or they assume that just like things will be the same, like, plus like a little bit of technology sprinkled in or something like that. But my opinion is that, completely different. It'll be completely different. I think maybe instead of people living in atomic families, it's mostly people living alone, right? I think you're gonna have a lot of. I think because there's just such a wedge between the male and female, especially the young males and females are just such. There's such an ideological wedge between them. I think you'll see a lot of maybe like the average person will just be living alone, right, and just kind of like dicking around. I don't know what their day to day is going to look like. Maybe they'll be, the poor ones will be just doing Amazon work, to get out of debt or something like that. And the other ones are just, they won't be, going to the mall with their friends or watching movies with their friends. Like, their friends, they might, join a Discord, at 9 or something like that. But otherwise, they're just going to be, and do I think it's going to be better or worse? I don't know. It kind of depends on, I guess who you are and what you position yourself as. But the main thing I want to, I guess, debunk is the idea that like our lives will look anything like our parents. Um, and our, I'm just meaning as a generation coming up, a younger generation of kind of taking the place. I think just the way that everything is moving is going to be completely different. So if you're going to prepare for anything, prepare for just perpetual change. Because instead of things maybe taking several generations, right? Like cars took a long time to roll out, and then there's like this whole like, and we're gonna make roads. So like, what are these roads for? And there's like, well, now there's this cotton gin thing that'll make the thing for us, and it's like, well, that's new, that's interesting. Now it's like everything will change so quickly and so often that like one, I think you're gonna get a lot more people that are just very resistant to change, which I'm not even saying is a bad thing. I think a lot of the change is bad. I think it isn't. We're not moving in the right direction, and not because of any like weird like uh, you know religious or moralistic reason. I think truly it's even more of a biological reason. I just don't think we're suited to do half this shit that that the future is planning for us, right? To live alone in these little pods and spend all of our time in the metaverse or whatever it is that these tech overlords think that we're going to be doing all day. But they are right about one thing, is that the things won't ever really be the same. And so part of what I think the job of maturation should be, if you're a person coming up, is to accept that change is the only constant that you can expect, right? I mean, to have any kind of semblance, like, well, this is what my parents did. Everything that your parents did will never, like, it won't, nothing, none of that will exist in any remotely recognizable form whatsoever. So, like, the idea that, like, well, because it's worked is like this is very foolish, I think. Whereas maybe 100 years ago that it would have been really good advice to do what your parents said to do. But like now you hear what parents are telling their kids to do, and you're like, are you fucking dumb? What are you talking about? This is just not the way the world works in that way. I realize it worked for you in that way, but you're a boomer. I don't know that you really know what's going on with the world. Or have, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's like we will just have it'll be the same houses. You'll have two kids, a dog, and an Alexa that, now can vacuum and do things. But I just think with the amount of investment and inequality of all different kinds, and just the social, again, kind of the whole disillusion of the moral monopoly that the church once had. Not that it was a good thing out completely. I mean, I think mostly it kind of was a positive thing. Kind of helped some people have, at least, maybe even if you didn't agree with it, you still like at least knew what was expected of you morally. And if you went off of that, you went off of that, and you knew that you weren't going to be accepted in the church, and that was just kind of your thing. Even if it wasn't church, I'm just using that as like a catch-all for any other kind of religion. Even if you were in a society that wasn't particularly religious, there was still kind of a collective moral code, where it's like, well, we Swedes don't do this. It's like, okay, all right, well, that's fine. Everyone kind of gets that. And maybe there's places, I think, there'll still be places like that, like maybe some of these, maybe older historical places, maybe in Europe and things that just don't change as quickly. And that might be a great place to be. But I think if you're in a Western area or one that is involved in a lot of these, I don't know, dick measuring wars, if you're in America, really, uh, or Canada, or I just wouldn't expect things to be anything remotely close to what they were, when you were a child. So part of it is just kind of dispelling a lot of the uh, childhood fantasies of what's going to happen. That's another thing. I just think a lot of people have just infantilized their entire lives. They imagine that it's just they're like it's all everything's a Disney movie, and they're like just babies, and things will all be on this movie thing, and it's I don't know. I feel like uh, a lot of what being satisfied with your life boils down to is your expectations. Expectations define everything, and if you have ridiculous expectations for how things are going to go, you're probably not going to have a great. It's probably not going to be a great result, and maybe it will be. And it's like there's almost like this level of brainwashing that's actually positive, right? There's like I've said before, it's like I think manifestations are really stupid, but on some level, it's like in order for anything that is unlikely to happen, you have to have some level of like extraordinarily delusive belief, where it's like I don't know, there's some level of a beneficial delusion. Um, but at the same time, it's like I think living in that delusion permanently causes you, to think that you're the princess in the movie, or you're you are the founder and CEO of the next Facebook or something like that. I think is just a silly way to exist, and now that's really all that's being peddled. That's being peddled. I mean, if you're under the age of 30, pretty much everything is just a gambling. I mean, it's all just gambling. There's just nothing. Your career is a gamble. You have to like, there's just not anything that's like. I mean, there are things that still are like tried and true and steady. You can be a plumber and things like that. But everything that is promising the fame and fortune that you think that you deserve from the Jason Bourne movie you watched when you were 11, is now just like this gamble, right? Like being an influencer is a complete. All that is just a gamble, right? It's just continually doing stupider and stupider things until you hit the jackpot. You think like Mr. Beast. Did he invest in a particular skill of any kind? Does he have any kind of discernible skill? Like, is he a particularly good speaker? No, he's not. He's not really. I mean, he doesn't. He's kind of autistic, really. I mean, he does not. He doesn't really sound articulate, right? Even like, is he attractive? No, not even that. I don't think he is either. It's like, what discernible skill does he have that? It's like, well, nothing. I think part of it is that he played the lottery, with his, he used his time to play the lottery, and in the lottery, and in the sense of being an influencer, and he won. And that's just like that's what people are kind of banking on. That's what they live for. Is like, well, maybe I can be the next Mr. Beast, have no discernible skill or talent whatsoever, and somehow manage to amass all this fame and fortune. Of course, which they'll then realize is not the point of the whole thing. So they're gonna get all this money and attention, and then they're gonna be like, well, this sucks actually. They'll be on the boat alone with no friends. They'll have the boat. Sure, they'll have a yacht, but you have people that you're just going to pay to be there. It's not like you're going to, really be satisfied once you've won this lottery. But that's all that's really being promoted. There's not a whole lot of like reasonable expectations, because even like the reskilling and retraining stuff, like people getting degrees, or it's not ever about like a humble story of like, you work your way to like. Because even like buying a house now is almost like a lottery. It's like, I don't think that there's just 90% of people are going to be able to just work that out. It's like, but the commercials is like a single dad who's struggling to make payments gets reskills as a software engineer, and then gets a job at Google and is now CEO of it. It's like, no, he owns 10 gas stations. It's like that's just not even that is unreasonable to think that everybody can do that. So they're just all they're doing is just saying, well, hey, play the lottery, you might win. That's really all I see when I see those kinds of commercials. It's just a different form of a lottery. That's all that is. And if you drive through any city, like most of the cities now have giant like there's like tributes, like giant memorializations of the lottery, and it's like this enormous building that's like, how on earth, like who the hell paid for that giant building, and like what are they doing in there? It's a lottery. It's like the West Virginia lottery, and it's like this 80-story building that's just so much larger than any like like even like the I don't know the I don't know, like what the head of education or something, like the Center for Education is just like was one story, or and philosophy departments are being broken up because they're useless. But yet, like the lottery center, and I'm sure like Pornhub probably has their own headquarters that is a 90-foot skyscraper or 90,000-foot skyscraper. I don't know. It's ridiculous. We're just kind of moving towards this like lottery life, which is not one that I think is very balanced. I don't think that's really, I don't know. But it makes money, so I suppose that's kind of doesn't matter what I say if it makes money. Um, yeah. So here, let me look at something else here. Um, yeah. Here's another thought, and this is kind of a totally not related to what I was saying. I was thinking about like design and what makes things have like clean, effective, intuitive designs. And I think one thing about really good designs, and maybe this is just specific to software, but I think this does apply elsewhere. But I think good design should punish being disorderly. So my example for this is I recently set up a server, and that there's it's a home server where you're like hosting media, just hosting whatever files you want, and it's quite obvious if your files, if your file system is a clusterfuck of names and dates and all this random there's no hierarchy, there's no structure. Um, the UI is kind of a mess. And I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, well, this is stupid. They should be ordering my files for me. No, I think it's good, actually. It's a good design that it's punishing you for being messy. It's like if you're a messy person, it should punish you because I think that it should incentivize good behavior, right? It shouldn't incentivize uh, being disorganized. So same with like, I don't know, it's like having like an auto sorting file cabinet or something like that. I think you should have a good design should assume that things are organized. And like one, it obviously forces you to be more orderly if it like requires an orderly design to function, to its fullest extent. But in the other sense, it also it's limiting in a good way because you don't want. I think if you have to assume that people are organizing files or just in like these clusterfuck, this unlimited or these crazy different ways, then you have to like make all these weird sacrifices to accommodate again ridiculous file setups. Whereas I think if you just say, well, have a structure for it and it'll work, it'll just mirror that structure. I think that is a good incentive. So I don't know. I just thought that uh, the axiom to pull from this was that good design should punish being disorderly or should incentivize being orderly, but more so on like the punishing being disorderly. Because if my media files were all misnamed and they're all, and sure, you could like look at the metadata and extract and make it easier, but I even think it not doing that very well is good because it requires me to have, clean, sensible structures, folders, names for all the files, and not this like hodgepodge clusterfuck of whatever. So it's good in that sense. But I don't know. That was my little axiom. Um, Something else that I'm suspicious of, and maybe I'm not alone in this. I feel like this is again totally unrelated. This is just next on my list of haikus. I think there's something up with like mattress companies. You like the mattress stores. I mean, because if you drive around, rural America or wherever, you run into. I mean, you'll see that there's right next to each other. It's like mattress warehouse and furniture warehouse, and they're like right they're just these like warehouses of mattresses and furniture, and you're wondering how on earth, like one, they managed to even pay the rent in these places. I think it's maybe one thing if these buildings are paid off, which they might be, but like again, it seems like a huge waste to have this much things for like a mattress. How often are people buying mattresses? Like I think a mattress it should be like a 10-year purchase, right? And maybe it's just like I know there are all these special financing and things, but I'm just not sold on the idea that uh mattresses are warrant having, back to back warehouses of stuff right next to each other. Even like, cause I think like you see it a lot with like CVS and, Rite Aid or something are like right next to each other. And like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they be right next to each other? It's like a Walmart next to a Food Line. It's like, well, they're kind of competing in the same real estate. Wouldn't it make sense to move one like a mile down the road? But those I think make even less sense than like, cause you go to the grocery store, maybe a couple times a week or once a week, or even every day. Some people do. But how often are you buying a mattress? I mean, my God, speaking of things that be done sparsely, the mattress feels like I can't even. When is the last time I bought a mattress? I don't know. Um, and even so, there's like even I know on Amazon's probably half people do it anyway. So it's like, what's even point of the brick and mortar mattress store, and why are they so large? So it just would never surprise me if it came out in like 5 years that those big mattress firms were just a big money laundering scheme. So I don't know. That's just like a ridiculous prediction that I have. I'm not saying that it is true or that I have any evidence to support this. My evidence is entirely circumstantial and conspiratorial. And it's not that I don't even have any beef with any of these companies. I don't really care if they haven't done anything to me, but it just seems impractical for that much real estate to be dedicated to such a sparse purchase, especially like, just the size of the buildings. And I don't know, but anyway, um, I was thinking about feeling smart because, I when I finished getting my server set up, I went through a brief moment. I was like, wow, I'm pretty smart to feel this. And then it was quickly after I tried to configure another thing that I realized that I am stupid. So I think there's almost like this, it's just funny, like paradigm of like, you have to kind of be stupid enough to feel smart, right? I think feeling smart requires a level of stupidity. Whereas like, um, I don't know if you truly are smart. I don't think should ever feel smart. Um, But if you are stupid, you might feel smart all the time. And maybe that's why it is. And people that ever think they're smart, you always know they're like, well, this guy's an idiot. Like, I'm a pretty smart guy. Anyone that's ever said that, my God, God help me. But it's just funny that you almost need to have this stupidity to feel smart. So I don't know. I felt smart for a second and I was like, wow, I'm actually stupid. So good thing it was a very transient feeling. It didn't last too long. Otherwise, we might have some more soul searching to do. But anyway, I'll move on to something else here. Oh, this is a incredibly hot take of mine, and this might take the rest of the time. I hope it does actually, because there's a lot I want to unpack here. So this is a lot, and this might just apply to me. This may not be. I don't think this is anything that's like paradigm shifting in terms of I don't know, being a mental health clinician of any kind. But I posit, at least to me, again, this is for me, not for anyone else. This is not serious. I'm not a doctor or whatever. Uh, I think that depression is simply just taking life too seriously. I think that's part of what I've realized about anything I've had you might call a depressive episode is simply just me being too serious about stuff. It's simply just taking life too seriously. Because I feel like the solution to all of the uh, my woes has just been to stop like, and it's not to say that you shouldn't give a fuck about anything. That's it's obviously like there's a line of being too unserious about things, but certainly when things just feel uh, for me when things get too serious, they just get so fatalistic, and then there's just not really a point in doing anything. It's like, well, we're all gonna die. Not even like fatalistic in a mortality sense, but fatalistic period. Uh, it just tends to lead to depression. And I think even a lot of other people's depression too might just be that they're taking everything too serious. They assume there's like, well, I fail, I'm a failure. It's like, so I'm thinking about why people would be depressed. Like why do people fall into depressive states? And on some things it's a failure to do something, right? It's some kind of failure, and whether that failure is real or not is one thing. But even if a failure is real, I think part of the reason that makes it sad is that you're taking it serious, right? And it's not like you shouldn't ever take anything serious, but I think taking it too serious and not viewing it as, again, just like uh, a failure, on a brief stint of I don't know, exploration. It's whatever, however you want to frame, I guess, living at all. Um, I think is what can cause people to be, I guess, overly dramatic about the whole thing. Not calling anyone who's depressed, being dramatic, but I do think there is a level of unseriousness that is truly helpful in life. And I think if you go through life completely serious, like if you're one of those people that, like, you've all seen those grandmothers who like have no wrinkles because they've never smiled or anything like that, and some of those people are just, I guess, maybe they're depressed or not. I don't know, but they just take everything too damn serious. Like nothing can be a joke to them, right? And I think part of that is part of it, even just looking at that archetype, and that type of old person being like, I shoot me if I ever get anywhere, anything like that, where just everything is just, or you're like some, I don't know, nut of some kind, some ideological nut. Maybe you're into astrology, or you're into, you're a Catholic now. You're like a strict Catholic, even though you were a whore in your 20s. It doesn't, I don't want to be part of any of that. I don't want that to be any part of my life. So I want, I almost want to embrace a required level of unseriousness with everything that I do, including my career or whatever. Because again, it's like if you look at everything, it's like, well, I lost my job and my dog died. Like everything can be taking everything serious, like especially in the modern age, is no wonder that you're sad and you're depressed and you're serious. It's like if you take all of the serious all the time, I would think there's something wrong with you if you're not, if you're not habitually depressed. So I think part of the answer to that is just to stop taking everything so serious. Again, treat things as jokes, find and then just look for what's funny in them. And part of that is a skill to learn. Is like, okay, discovering what is funny. Okay, so my dog just died. How did it die? Was there a funny way that it died? Right? Did it make a funny noise when I ran over it or something? Again, I don't know how your dog died. I don't really care. But the thing is, again, if you take everything so serious, or it's like, fine, I lost my job. I quit because I didn't show up or something like that. Make it funny now. I don't know. Show up. Do something. It's like there has to be some way to make to find humor in what is otherwise an unfortunate circumstance, right? And maybe like who was that fucking idiot that you always worked with, right? That you can start bantering about him. There's just always, I think there's always something if you look for it. There's always something funny to be found, something unserious to be found, even in the most serious of situations. Um, it's not that you should never take anything serious. That's not what I'm advocating for. But especially people that are prone to long depressive episodes, I think one of the antidotes that I found is to look for the unseriousness of things. And it's even worse with like politics is a hilarious example because if you struggle to find anything unserious about politics, I don't know what's wrong with you to start, because everything about politics is hilarious to me. There's not a single thing that isn't just comically funny and how. And I realize it's like if you take it serious, it's like, well, this is important. This is our country. Is it like fine, whatever? Even if it is, it's like it's either going to collapse with you in it, or it's going to collapse soon after, or even if it won't. I think taking all of this serious is even funnier, even in a lot of ways than trying to find something funny. But the idea that like it isn't hilarious, just seeing like what is going on politically, and like if that is really what's spiraling you into a depression, I think you truly have a problem of seriousness, meaning that you're just taking things just too damn serious. So I don't know. It's been the avenue for me, I think, and it could be I don't know, a very viable alternative out. And some people, find this unseriousness through being satire, being satirical, or just kind of doing everything or investigating news with the satirical eye. It's like, oh, good, yeah, I'm interested in buying the new Alexa 3 Pro or whatever. I actually am hoping to get better at being satirical and unseriousness about the changes, because it's I don't know, it's sorrowing, especially being I'm not going to call myself a cynical person, but I think taking things for what they are, it's hard not to sound like a cynic, at least, because it's just too easy to pick apart what the problems with things are. Especially for someone that kind of looks for holes or nuances in technology or nuances in anything. It's hard not to see just things that are just rife with fundamental issues. And I think taking those seriously and crying about them is one way to go about it. But especially if you're going up against a wall and it's frustrating for you and it's depressing in any sense, then why take it so seriously? It doesn't mean that you can't still advocate for things, but it's like the idea that I'm going to cry over the Linux market share next year. For one, that's just a hilarious vision to me. It's just somebody bawling in tears because the Linux operating system isn't taking over. But it's not going to stop me from still promoting and being a part of that kind of movement. But the idea that I'm going to shed a tear over somebody using Windows, or Windows being the official operating system of the NFL, or whatever bullshit sponsorship is going to come out of it, because presumably, I mean, we're going to see more and more ridiculous things happen in the world, and if you just take them serious, you're just going to be in this constant like state of just like crying, like, oh my god, drunk driving's in the Olympics, I can't believe it, and it'll be sponsored by DraftKings. I mean, there won't be anything left that isn't. It doesn't even sound like a joke on the surface. I mean, like If you would tell me, if you would have told me that, masturbating to completion, it will be in the 2028 Olympics, I will not bat an eye. I mean, I will laugh obviously because it's funny, but like I would not be surprised at all given the trajectory of the world. And to me, it's like I think it's if I were someone that was very serious about the Olympics and really cared about like the history and like the importance of the Olympics, I'd be devastated to find out the jacking off was in the Olympics. But because like I almost refuse to take, most of what's outside my immediate sphere seriously, I don't give a fuck. I can laugh at it. It's actually hilarious to think that that would be in the Olympics and would be sponsored by a gambling company, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. Just hoping Johnny Sins makes his appearance, or the Pope. Actually, I'll take either one. But anyway, that's my time. I'll wrap it up for there. Thanks for watching. Peace out.